Hello, my socially aware art sluts. It's Allison Moon, and you are listening to Artgasm. This is a special bonus episode, part 2 of my conversation with Dixie De La Tour of Body Storytelling. It's a special in-between episode, and I'm so happy that you're joining us for part 2 of the conversation. If you are listening to this the day that this episode drops, you're listening on a very important day. In America, at least, it is midterm election day, and I swear to God, I really hope you are listening to this in the car on the way to a voting booth, or on your walk on the way to a voting booth, or you are in line waiting to vote. If you, like me, have a relatively large amount of privilege, you might think that your local elections don't actually matter that much because they won't directly affect your life. Well, so here's the truth. Voting actually matters. Sorry to reveal the secret to you. And even if you think it's not going to directly affect your life, consider the person without health insurance, or the person who's undocumented, or the person who was intimidated by the government to be separated from their young children because that's better than being murdered by a cartel. Or vote on behalf of the person who has an unwanted pregnancy, or is worried about the legality of their marriage being challenged, or the person whose very identity is being ridiculed or challenged by the government as we speak, or just the person who wants to vote but is scared or overwhelmed to try. Vote for them, because this election does matter to them. And I'm actually pretty sure it matters to you too, whether or not it's obvious to you right now. Listen, I have anxiety just like most people do, and you gotta get over that shit to do important things in order to be a citizen of the world. Sometimes you have to do the scary stuff or the challenging stuff, and you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone into some place that's a little bit more intimidating to do the right thing. Voting is the right thing. Okay. Soapbox number 1 complete, and now on to soapbox numero dos. Sex in cinema and sex as story. When I was a kid, before I came out to my parents, I remember a very specific car ride. I was in the back seat and my parents were up front, and we were driving somewhere in the countryside in Ohio. And I think it was June because my mom brought up the subject of Pride, as in the event, the big gay parade. And my mom sighed and said, I just don't understand why it always has to be about sex. And at that point, I was already out to myself and my friends, but not out to them. And I knew enough about my identity to know that that hurt on some level. What I said in that moment was, life is about sex, Mom. You just don't see that because society never told you that you were doing it wrong. What I didn't say then is that when you don't see your sexuality represented or honored in society, you are often left feeling shame. You may believe that there's something wrong with you and your feelings, which is why the event is called Pride. Now, I could have been more articulate, but it was a different time. Today, 20-odd years later, allow me to elucidate. So I saw Bohemian Rhapsody last night, the Queen biopic, and I'm going to talk, rant, about it. No spoilers, unless you know literally nothing about Freddie Mercury's life. So I'm cautious to rail too much on any works of art. I don't consider myself a critic, and I also know how hard it is to make something. And it definitely sounds like Bohemian Rhapsody suffered from the too many cooks syndrome. Director changed midstream, development lasted years and years, and a lot of different interests, including lead guitarist Brian May as a producer. Movies are complicated business, but ultimately it resulted in a film about one of the most famously sexual artists of all time that was timid about sex. And that timidity actually ended up muddling the film. It was a detriment to the storytelling. And I felt like I left the theater understanding less about Mercury and Queen than when I did when I entered. And not in some like, oh, he was such an enigma way. So let me talk a little bit about plot points. If you don't want to hear anything about plot, I would say skip a minute in advance and then we're just going to talk about theory. So first, the first time we're meant to see Mercury having an awakening into his bisexuality. He's making eyes with a trucker while he's on a payphone with his fiancée. I'm going to say fiancée because we never actually find out if they ever got married in the movie. Her name is Mary. So Rami Malek, who's playing Freddie Mercury, he has this inscrutable look on his face. The trucker enters the men's room and kind of gives Rami the like, come follow me vibe. And Rami is left confused. Cut to the men's room door. Cut to Rami. And we're waiting for him to make a choice. Does he follow the trucker or does he walk in the opposite direction? Both choices will tell us something significant. What does the film do? It just cuts to the next scene. We don't see him move in either direction. We don't know if he cheated on his wife that night. We don't know if it was his first sexual experience with a man. We don't know if that lingering look was all he had that night and it haunted him until he finally did sleep with a man. We, the audience, have no idea what that scene meant other than confusion. Then, later, there's another scene where a man who works for him, Freddie Mercury, kisses him. Again, we don't know if this is the first time Mercury's been propositioned. He resists, and the guy kind of presses onward and kind of shames him. We don't know if this is because he loves his fiancée or if he's ashamed of his feelings. We have no idea what the kiss means to Freddie Mercury in that moment. Then later, we're meant to assume that Mercury and this employee do indeed start sleeping together, but not because we ever see it or even hear it discussed. We don't know when the first time would happen. It's just obliquely referred to by his bandmates. And then one point, we're again meant to assume there was a threesome on the road, but we never see the men in bed together, or even if they're just waking up. We see Mercury's shame, but is it because he's queer or because he's still cheating on Mary? Then finally, there's a scene about halfway through the movie where Mary confronts Mercury and asks him to come clean. And this is the audience's moment to receive clarity. Mercury will tell us what he's been doing since the movie is too afraid to show us. Does he admit he's been cheating? Does he ask for an open relationship? No. He comes out as bisexual, which Mary immediately refutes and says, no, you're gay. And Mercury sits in silence, processing this. He doesn't refute it. He doesn't agree. He doesn't say whether or not he ever enjoyed having sex with Mary, nor does he mention if women are ever involved in these on-the-road flings, which, if you know Mercury's real life, yes, he was having sex with women throughout his life. So we have no idea how he feels about any of this at all. We have no more information after this scene about Mercury's sexual orientation or his feelings about his sexual orientation or even his actual sexual behaviors than we did before. The film goes on to make more oblique references to Mercury's sex life. We see him at a leather club, but we never see him engage in anything. We see him at parties at his place, but we never see men stay over. To that end, we never even see him take any of the drugs that are supposedly controlling his life in the second act. Was he even having fun? All of this combines to create this very muddled picture of a very isolated and honestly frigid man. And maybe that really was Freddie Mercury. I didn't know him in real life, but the movie isn't clear on it. It doesn't tell you anything about Mercury's actual feelings about his sexuality. It shows him as a victim to a bunch of people's agendas. Now, I want to be very clear. None of this is actually a condemnation of Rami Malek's acting. I think he did a really great job with a tough role and rather unclear writing and directing and possibly editing. The point of all of this is similar to actually what Dixie and I talked about on the last episode and continue to talk about in this next episode. Sex is part of life. It's not a silo we keep under lock and key that we enter once in a while and then leave and lock up when we're done. It is woven into every aspect of our lives. How someone kisses, how someone touches, how they undress, how they fuck. It's not extra. It's relevant all the time. One of the great sins, I think, in our culture is trying to act as though sex is separate. This allows us to deny it and feel and instill shame in ourselves and others. How we do it, how we don't do it, how we should be doing it, how we shouldn't. And you can't tell me that Freddie Mercury wasn't integrated in terms of his sexuality, at least at some level. It's in every costume, every song, every strut, every interview. The man owns his sexual identity. Whether or not he struggled with it, it was still his, and it pulsed through him. This is what made him so alluring as a music lover, as a rock and roll fan. And as an audience member in a movie, I don't want to see sex scenes just for a cheap thrill. I want them because they tell me something about a character. Good sex scenes don't grind the story to a halt for 30 seconds of titillation. Like real-life sex, sex scenes reveal character, they progress story, they add stakes, they complicate things. This is why real-life intimacy is so exciting, or can be. You get to see a person in a way that few others in the world get to see them, to see how they respond to touch, where they're frightened, where they're ennobled, what they're excited about, what they are avoidant of. This is the contract that lovers enter into, and this is also the same contract that an audience enters into with a film. We are supposed to be able to see characters more intimately, more deeply, in more private moments than the rest of the world does. That's what makes cinema so damn appealing. And sex doesn't look like one thing. The way bodies and humans interact with one another tells us the important stuff. And when you cut to black to avoid showing us those details, you cheapen the story. And when the character is queer, it's all the more important. And when a character is arguably the most famous queer rock star of all time, you're not going to tell me anything about how queerness specifically moved through him? Really? I think what's upsetting about this for a queer audience is that this felt like a very coded moralistic stance. It's totally fine if straight people or other queers didn't read that into this, but I certainly did, and I know a lot of other queers saw this. The omission of any explicit sexuality or even his own journey through sexuality, plus loneliness, plus contracting HIV, and then ultimately dying from it, it read like a morality play to me. We never heard Mercury talk about his sexuality with any sort of power or pride or ownership. And the reason why this is so frustrating, so offensive, is that we queer audiences, we've seen this before. It's actually a really tired old story. And it's just not what I imagined Freddie Mercury would feel about his own sex life. Now, I don't know whose puritanism was at fault here in the making of this movie. It could have been any number of people. It could have been fear of the MPAA, who is notoriously homophobic and sexist. What I do know is that we need more sex scenes, not less. We need more complex sex scenes, more sex scenes where people laugh and cry and do the wrong thing and apologize and stop because something isn't working or something is uncomfortable and ask for what they want and share their excitements and anxieties. We need more character development through sex, not circumventing it. What hurt me the most about this movie specifically was that multiple times throughout the film, the band states that they're making music for the misfits, the outsiders. Yet, as far as I could tell, Freddie is the only outsider on screen. Maybe Brian May and the rest are ostracized by being intellectuals, maybe? But ultimately, they're all family men who seem to fit in quite well. And this movie doesn't feel like it was for a queer person like me, or even a straight person who wants to understand queerness on a deeper level. It was for PG audiences who are okay with the idea of queerness as long as no men are touching each other and enjoying it. Which, that's not the Freddie Mercury or the Queen I grew up listening to. The Queen that made me feel all sorts of pants feelings when I watched their videos, and it helped illuminate my own nascent desires. Because you can't separate sex from life. You can't separate sex from the experience of music or art forms in any way. rock and roll is a queer genre, maybe one of the queerest art forms in the world, and Freddie was the queen of them all. This movie did not do him or his legacy justice. So, obviously, I have a lot to say about this, and I'm going to talk more about character development and the importance of sex scenes on my Patreon. So, if you're interested in that, listen at patreon.com/artgasm. It's patreon.com/artgasm to get all the goods. Meanwhile, if you have a stake in this conversation, I hope that you'll see the movie yourself and make your own decision. I try very hard not to have opinions on things that I actually haven't engaged with, and I hope that you hold that same value. Because it's also quite possible that you'll watch the movie and come to a different conclusion, which I think is frickin' fabulous, and that's literally why I enjoy art, is because good people with good brains can have different opinions about something. I mean, I actually enjoyed many parts of the film, but obviously I had my gripes as well, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. The beauty of engaging with art. So, speaking of art, let's now direct our focus to part 2 of my conversation with Dixie De La Tour. We talk about her formula for telling a great story, and we continue to have a whole lot of fun. So please enjoy part 2 of my interview with Dixie De La Tour. Cool. So you coach people.
Oh, I like the cock of your head as you said that. Just like, hello, I'm Terry Gross.
I'm decidedly not Terry Gross.
Hello, I'm feeding you a line. I'm gonna give it. So you coach people. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my production manager gave me a set of index cards indicating stories you wanted to tell earlier on this.
Manager.
And your job as an actor is to make it look as though it was spontaneously happening in the moment that you're sitting in the chair.
Didn't I fail miserably?
Yeah.
I'm as bad at this as I am at knowing when I'm getting picked up by swingers.
Yeah, I mean, in the scale of surprise, getting picked up by swingers, not that surprising.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why it's
pretty easy to see that coming.
Yeah, right? And my whole life is sex parties. Shouldn't I have figured that one out? But everybody got to feel smarter than me, so it felt good for them, Yeah. And I'm, a great story is when you reveal you are kind of dumb from time to time.
That's true.
Or you didn't know something and you did it wrong.
Yeah.
You grabbed the hand sanitizer when you thought you grabbed the lube.
Right.
Do you know how many times a week I get pitched that story and they think nobody has ever done that before? Mm. I got one for you. You've never heard this one before. I was having anal sex and I reached behind me and I grabbed it and they started, I had grabbed, I'm like, the hand sanitizer. They're like, oh, how'd you figure it out? I'm like, I don't want to be mean, but I get pitched that 3 times a week. Yeah. Because we love stories like that.
Yeah.
We love stories when, because it's totally relatable.
It's relatable and it's funny. It's instant comedy.
Yeah, you feel it in your body. You're like, oh, my asshole hurts hearing about that. Oh, that's a great story. I'm having a visceral reaction to your comedy of errors at sex.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have 2 stories that are really about visceral things. But each time, as a storyteller, being on stage, hearing the audience go, oh no. And actually one of them is on video and the woman is sitting next to the person recording the video as I'm talking about the condom that got stuck inside of me.
Oh yeah.
And the feeling of pulling it out. And I can just hear this woman going, oh no. It still makes me so happy to hear that. So I'm like, yes, exactly. Yeah, but it's, I don't know, making people laugh is really great and fun. But making people groan or squirm in their seats, somehow way more fun.
Yeah. I don't enjoy that the same way.
Really?
I mean, I always kind of feel like I feel bad.
You've got way more groan-worthy stories, though.
They totally are, and I feel bad about that. I mean, everybody else is like, this is great. Yeah. When I get pitch stories from LA, for example, where they're like, I'm like, pitch me a sex-positive story. They're like, I'm going to tell the story. Are you ready for this? About the ugliest hooker I ever fucked and how she shit all over my bed. I'm like, not a sex positive. No, it's totally sex. No, you're positive you had sex. That is not a sex positive story. And I kind of feel I want to take care of the audience. And I feel bad if I'm like, okay, here comes the moment where we pull a spooge-filled condom out of a vagina. If that were me, I'd go, I feel bad for you guys. You didn't sign up for that, It's still good to enjoy, and I enjoy it more that it's you and not me.
Listen, the condom no longer had spooge in it. It had been in my vagina for 4 days.
So now it's out in your vagina. Great.
Yeah, it was not probably very safe.
Great.
Yeah.
But guess what?
Yeah.
We fuck up.
Yeah.
I hate stories when everybody goes, oh, and then once upon a time I met this person, and they were perfect, and I was perfect, and we had perfect sex, and at the end, it was all perfect. And I'm just like, I fell asleep. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with, like, I'm sure a lot of stories, and I'm sure I've told or pitched stories that are basically just humble brags, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with that? Like, what do you say?
So here's the secret. You want to know the secret?
Yeah.
When you were talking about, so you do coaching in that voice. In the process.
See, I knew it would come back. I knew it. I planted the seed.
Are you feeling like a smart podcaster?
Yeah, see, look at that. Look at how I did that masterfully.
So, for example, let's take a story where somebody says, I wanted to tell a story about how I got gangbanged by 5 guys. It was a great story. Oh, amazing. The sex was amazing. Everything was great. 5 guys. I fucked 5 guys. How about that? And I'm like, why do you tell that story? And they go, what do you mean, why do I tell that story? I'm like, why do you tell that story? Because I fucked 5 guys. Why did you do it? Are you fucking stupid? I did it for like the 73 orgasms I had. No, but why'd you really do it? And they look at you like you're stupid for a long time, and they argue with you and try and go, this is stupid. This is dumb. What do you mean? What do you mean? And then they start to cry. And when they cry, I know I got it. That's the moment. Why do you think I have a thing for tears? Tears are my jam. That one's from Antonia Crane. That's not mine, but I swear I want to embroider it and put it on the wall in my office. Tears are my jam because I know I got them.
Yeah.
I know I got the relatable kernel of a story. So when they tell me a brag and like, oh, I fucked 5 guys, and I'm like, why did you do that? Well, I was fat when I was a kid, and people told me I was ugly, and I had braces, and I never felt like I was good enough. And when these 5 guys wanted me to be the center of attention, and I felt beautiful, and they told me how good I was at all the things I did, I felt special. And the whole audience is going, I have never had a desire to get gangbanged by 5 guys, but that story moved me.
Yeah, I love it. You're already like tearing up a little bit just recounting this.
Tears in my jam.
Tears in my jam. Yeah. Huh.
And it's hard. And you wouldn't believe how many people fall out before the show.
Because they just can't be that vulnerable?
I'm just like, yeah, in the beginning, when we started 12 years ago, it was like, I'm going to get up and tell one. Shock value. Here's what it was sex party culture. It was people who did crazy things. They knew that they could tell stories in front of people who were not going to be shocked by it, And then as it grew and I started coaching them. I fell in love with story and I wanted to share it. I'm like, can I give you some tips? At first I was like, I don't want to tell you what your story is, but I hear this and that feels powerful to me. I fell in love with storytelling the art, and you'd hear a story and you're just like, there's a piece in there that you're not touching on. And I feel like you're going to walk off stage and beat yourself up and go, oh, but I left out the best part. And that's the worst feeling in the world,
Yeah. I felt that way the last time I told on your stage. Yeah. In Seattle, I there was a piece that I missed, and it was a contextual piece, but I thought it was really an important contextual piece because I talk about like how I'm not kinky, and then how I basically discovered that actually maybe I had a misunderstanding about what kink was, and that was really important for me. But the part that I feel like I missed, I'm trying to remember this right now. Is like the specifics of why I didn't like kink, right? Like I talked about like how role play I feel like is really fussy, and how for me I just don't want to have to think too hard when I'm having sex. Sex is one of the few places where I can turn off my brain and not feel like I'm hyper cerebral. And so like I remember having this list of like the things that I've been asked by partners to do before that I just never felt like I could go for. And so like role play was one of the big ones because like I don't have to remember like what my character is, and I don't have to fucking put on an outfit. Like I just want to be able to just be raw. And so I felt like the payoff would have been a lot better at the end when I talk about basically what became role play, but in a very organic kind of revealing way, as opposed to a thing you put on, a thing that you reveal. And I was like, fuck, because I felt like that the payoff would have been so much greater if people understood why I didn't think I liked the thing, and then discovered that I did because it was different from what I thought it was, right? And having missed the setup, I felt like the payoff was not as good,
Yeah, that's the worst feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just like, oh, there is a point, and you're not going to get the point now because you didn't get all the tools.
Exactly. You get the story, you get the laughs, you get I'll get all the adulation afterwards, but you don't get the point, and that's the worst feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that feeling.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of that was, I love storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help you get better at storytelling. I want to help you, it's your story. You decide.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to help you figure out, do you think maybe it's about that sex is about the journey, not the destination? This is a travel story. Oh, yeah. It's your story.
Yeah.
You can use it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I want to help you find the thing that is relatable in your story.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like talking about in writing anything. It's like theme is so important, and a lot of times, if you're good, the theme naturally reveals itself. But sometimes you have, like, sometimes as a writer, you have to start with the theme. You have to know what you want to say, and then you craft a story around getting to it. Like, what is the story about? Well, it's about how family transcends blood, right? Oh, great. Okay, so now you've got that as the theme.
Yeah.
How do you make a story about that?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have the story and the theme naturally emerges, but I think it's really helpful to keep that in mind. And when it comes to, like, personal anecdotes where you're like, oh, yeah, and then I got off, and then we, like, jizzed everywhere, and then, oh, no, clean up real fast. Like, it's like, okay, it's all the goofy.
And there's a screech, because we always feel like we have been allotted 30 seconds of airtime. Okay, the world's busy. I don't want to bother you.
Yeah.
Here's the story. I got gangbanged by 5 guys. Oh my God. I came 73 times. Screech! Did anything happen after that?
About me, I was tired.
I took a nap.
Yeah, took a nap. The guys went home.
I cleaned. They left. Let's put that in. Did you feel weird? Did you feel powerful? Did you feel what? This is when I lose them because I'm like, that screech. The audience feels that screech.
Yeah.
Let's give them the takeaway on this story. What's the thing that makes you go, oh, I felt unworthy. I felt ugly.
Right.
That was powerful. I've never wanted to do that, but now I don't. I'm going to go home and have an amazing conversation with the person that went to that show with me to go, would you ever do anything like that? Yeah. It sounded really interesting when she talked about it. I don't know. When they did that, I never knew that they do that. Yeah. Oh, it's good. I learned some stuff tonight. I started to play with an emotion that I've never played with before. Maybe I learned a few jargon tips. Jargon.
It's the king of the space race.
Jargon. And, it's when you start, it's not just that breakdown, what happened after the screech, but there's just like, so what, exactly like you said, so what's the story about for you? Family transcends blood. Okay. So how do we take this story you've told me and tell me how did I get to that place? How do we get the audience to that place? And when they start, I'm always looking for the tears. And when the tears come, some people go, that freaked me the fuck out. And they run away. And they never get on stage.
Right.
Because they're just like, it's too vulnerable.
Sure.
I tell shock value stories. I tell stories about how I'm the king of the perverts. But that's what people expect when they walk in our show.
Right.
They think it's going to be crazy sex stories.
Yeah.
And it is, depending on, the only constant in the show is me. And everything else is like, what story did you tell me? Let's figure out a way to fit that into the show. I want the crazy sex stories.
Yeah.
I want the guy with the sound in the head of his penis. Maybe. I want the girl who can't say pussy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But how do I get both of them to feel good and get the audience to go, holy shit, I learned something new. It's not just crazy sex stories. It's like powerful, moving, relatable stories.
That's one of the things that is hard. I feel like endings for the stories are the hardest part.
Yeah.
Not for fiction, but for my own life stories. Because again, like you're taking a chunk of your life.
Well, you're still alive.
Yeah, I'm still alive. There is the denouement is kind of, yeah. So I feel like but that's really the hardest part, especially when I don't know actually what the theme is. Like I know how to tell the story, but if I don't know what I want the audience to walk away with, it's like the ending is like, it's just really challenging.
I would love it if you do that on stage one time.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I did do that once kind of with the story about falling in love with my girlfriend is because, like, I didn't know how to end the story because there was no ending. So I was like, and so I lied when I said the story ended in my bed because it's still unfolding, blah, 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 blah. But that was kind of like a...
People always feel like that's a cheat.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's a cheat.
Yeah.
If you do it well, it doesn't feel like a cheat.
That's fair.
You know, it's just kind of like, I'm sorry, not every story you're going to get is going to be, then I died.
Then she broke up with me. Yeah.
How do you find, that's hard. How do you find the beginning, middle, and end of a story? Because people are like, there's no end to that story. We're still seeing each other.
Yeah, we're still in love.
We're still in love. Yeah. I can't give it an end, you know. Endings are the hardest part.
That's true.
I ran into them in the grocery store 6 years later. They just... every single thing attached to a story to them, particularly for a sex story, becomes that person. I'm going to tell you the time I went out with Sandra, you know, and then I met Sandra, and then, oh my God, and we did this, and we did that. Scrooge. Okay, and so, yeah, and then I got an email like 2 years later. It said, how you been? I haven't seen you in a while. And I felt bad and I didn't answer it. And then I ran to her in the grocery store 6 years later. Like, that's what happens after the screech.
Yeah.
They want to include every single interaction with that person because that person is that story for them.
Right.
And that's when we have to do the editing. We're like, we don't really need to know about the grocery store. And the email, did it go anywhere? It didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
So let's just take the screech and let's find, we're going to kind of like we're going to land them on a cushion. Like, okay, there was a screech. Now, how do we ease you into what's the takeaway on this story? Yeah. And takeaway's hard if you're still living the story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like, and this might be something that stand-up comedians relate to. I don't know. I don't do that. But I feel really comfortable when the audience is laughing out loud. I feel really great when they're cheering, right? But when they're quiet... like,
it's hard.
It's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And the end of the story, even if it's a rip-roaring hanging from the rafters orgy story, they're laughing and screaming and everybody's cheering and stuff. And then I have to take it back to quiet time and I have to stick the landing with something powerful or moving or thoughtful or just, you know, illuminating.
And until the standing ovation starts, you have no idea whether it works.
Exactly. It was just quiet now. And I had the high of like the screaming orgasms of audience laughter. And now it's the like... all right, do they like me? Are they going to call me tomorrow? Like all that chaos of like...
And if I've coached you, then you've gotten to that place where you're like, I tell this story because it's crazy wild and it's now you're making me be emotional and vulnerable and I'm emotional and vulnerable and now it's pin drop quiet, you fucking bitch. Yeah.
Yeah, and I again, like I acted on stage a lot, in school and college and a little bit after. But I remember some of my friends once told me, like, you can't hear a smile, which is like the way of like getting over your stage fright, basically, to be like, why is the room so quiet? It's like, well, sometimes they're listening really hard. And if they're laughing, they can't hear you. And so it's like, you have to be okay with the audience being pin drop silent, which is fucking terrifying for me. Like, I don't like that feeling of having everybody's attention being wrapped on my every word. I don't feel safe there. I feel safe when they're laughing and cheering.
My brain went to marketing brain and I was just like, the Artgasm podcast. You can't hear a smile. That's why I was making that face like, what?
Yeah, it's pretty cheesy. But
there you go. There's your tagline. You're welcome.
Man.
We were going somewhere. Coaching, and before that, people drop out.
Yeah.
So you spend hours and hours and hours working with them, and then they're just like, you want me to be real and human and vulnerable, and I can't do that. That's just... So then I spend a lot of time scrambling.
Yeah.
There's usually so much coaching. I love coaching. It's my favorite part because you get to convince people their story's important because they want to go. So I went on this website and I met this person and we went to a bar and we had a drink. And I have to sit there and manually go, what website? Okay, Cupid. What was their name? Andy. What did Andy look like? Had twinkly brown eyes and had curly hair, and you pull out the description, the crucial part, the description. Nobody ever gives even a gender. They don't give a gender. A person. Thank you. I'm so fucked. And then we went to a bar. What bar? The Lone Palm on 22nd Avenue. Oh, even if I've not been there, Lone Palm gives me a feeling for a bar.
Yeah.
What did you drink? Gin and tonics. I've had a gin and tonic. I know what it is. You just took the same amount of time that you would spend to say website, person, bar, drink. 5 seconds later, you actually have so much detail that I'm like, I feel like I've met Andy. I feel like I've been to the Lone Palm. I know I've tasted a gin and tonic. I've been on OkCupid. I am in this story.
But what does too much detail feel like?
I got an email 6 years later. It's too much detail. Too much detail is when you're still processing your story.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you're just like, oh my God, I was nervous. I went out and I stood next to the car and I felt like I dug around in my purse and I got a chapstick and I put it on. It was the cherry flavor. It was pretty good. I was just stalling out. I knew that. I looked at my phone. I wrote a few text messages. You're processing your story. There's always too much. We go from a story pitch looks like this. To pitch me a story at Buddy, you use the voice memo on your phone. I say, so you're all lit up by story now. You've been listening to stories all night. I want you to turn on your voice memo on your way, walking a bar or whatever you're going to do. Just tell me a story. It's just me. You've met me.
Yeah.
I'm not scared. Just tell me. Well, usually they've had a couple drinks, so it's a little easier, and they're lit up by story. I heard stories. They were great stories. I'm probably a great storyteller. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And then they have this flood, and at least you have the flood of emotion that is just like, oh my God, that second story totally made me think of this one time. And there's no gender often because we feel like we have to maintain confidentiality. Maybe somebody knows Andy in the audience. You know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, I'm going to hide all the details.
Yeah.
And when I get to the sex part, I'm going to go, and then we did it. Every single fucking time. There's no context. There's no relatability. There's no descriptions. It's just website, person, bar.
Well, do you feel like there is some sort of responsibility to privacy, though? Like, I mean, if a story happened between two people and only one person's telling the story, like, do you feel like there's some sort of responsibility to protect the identity?
How did I know you were going to bring that up?
Really?
Yes, of course.
don't feel
This
like
is totally an Allison Moon question.
Okay, there we go.
Trademark, Allison Moon. What is your responsibility to the other person in your story? TM, pay me a payment. I believe that every story between two people is made up of two people's takes on things. You're entitled to your take. When it comes to confidentiality, there's a few things you can do. One, you can ask the person if it's okay to use their name in the story. Guess what? The story still belongs to you. You know?
Yeah.
Did you get gangbanged by 5 guys? That is true. That is the story. Can you name the 5 guys? Probably not cool.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of like, I don't know, they're pretty proud of the fact they did that, contact the 5 guys. Contact the 5 guys, and they're like, oh, say my first name and my last name. I want everybody to know I'm really good at gangbanging.
Yeah.
In our world, there's plenty of that.
Yeah.
People who are very proud, please make sure you say my full name and include my phone number if you feel comfortable with that. Like, we're not going to do that. Too much detail. But it's your story.
Yeah.
You know? If you're worried about confidentiality, usually they start with, I had sex with a person. Okay, let's work on that. What did they look like? Did they have a name? I would like to call them W. Why? Well, his name was Wendell. Are you saying W because Wendell would be upset? Well, I don't want to out W. I don't want to out Wendell, so I'm going to say W. You know how I feel about that? I feel that W is pretty much just it's just, could you make it more clear you're lying? It's like, hi, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you everything, but I'm going to tell you nothing. I'm going to say, and especially, this makes me crazy, let's call them W. So you just want to broadcast the fact that you're hiding stuff in your stories. Yeah. I mean, this is what the coaching's about. This is just like, don't get up there and go, well, let's call them W. The audience instantly, you know that thing they do at comedy clubs where they fold their arms and they sit back and go, okay, this is some bullshit, you know? They do that. So you're telling me you're not going to tell me, and you told me you're telling me everything. The show says we tell you everything, and you're telling me you're not telling me everything.
Interesting.
So that's part of the coaching. Okay, when you get on stage, what's their name? W. No, it's not. Would you like to give them a name that starts with W?
No.
So you can feel like you maintain confidentiality? Well, I could call him Walter. Great, let's call him Walter. Okay, this is progress.
Yes.
We can draw a picture for Walter.
Yeah.
Right? We can't draw pictures if their identity is they, gender identity comes into this too. We can't, our goal is to walk through a story as you for 10 minutes. I can't walk through the story if you don't give me anything.
Yeah.
If you say, I was on a website, met a guy, we went and had a drink at a bar, you give me nothing.
Yeah.
My reaction as an audience is going to be going, okay.
Yeah.
But if you give me the crucial details that I'm going to need in a story, you've heard this for 10 years at Body, Allison, when they get to the point where there's a detail, where there's a description that comes to life and they can see the characters, they go, ah. How many times a show do you hear, ah?
Yeah, that's true.
Because I've said, not a good description. Let's make Walter come to life, you know? Let's give him a name. Let's give him something that comes to life. Not his height, not the jacket he was wearing, not his haircut. Why are those the way people... Well, he was 5'8" and had brown hair. Oh my God, he just came to life for me. That was more like a,
I feel like one of the first affirmations I've ever received from you while on stage, I just told a story, and you, in your like patter between storytellers, you're like, so you hear how she described this person? And I was like, oh, I did it good. It was just such a nice moment. And I remember because the way he looked was incredibly salient for me. Like even years later, the same story of losing the condom, because he was a light-skinned black man with green eyes and really long dreads, and when he fell back, I think I said something like his dreads splayed out and he looked like a sexy lion, and I was just like, and you were just like, yay. I'm like, oh cool, all right. I did a good job.
Yeah, you do great descriptions. Can I confess something to you?
Yeah.
You are so smart that I always get into my head that I'm just like, Allison's so smart and I'm not very smart. I do that all the time because you are so book smart. You know, and know so much about storytelling in a totally different way. Often I'll sit here and I'll start geeking out on story, and you'll come in and go, yeah, Dixie, that's called the inciting incident. Fuck. I knew she was going to do that.
But I mean, that's the thing, like, there's such beauty in the instinct of understanding. Like, you don't need to know the names of these things. Like, this is a big thing in screenwriting, right? Like, there's so many books about, like, all right, these are the moments that you have to have, and you have to have, like, the inciting incident, and then you have to have, like, you can do the hero's journey, or the blah, 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 and, and people will granulate this stuff, and people will turn this into, like, formulas you have to follow, which can be great and useful when you get stuck, but it can also be maddening. You get the whole, like, paralysis by analysis situation, where you're like, oh, no, I didn't have a strong enough second act turn, or pinch point, or whatever the fuck, right?
Yeah.
But we've all grown up seeing movies. We've all grown up telling each other stories. Like, human beings are so oriented towards story. We have an instinct for it. Yeah. Some people's instincts are better than others. And some people had to learn by book how to get to these places. But for the most part, if you want to write a movie, write a fucking movie. You don't need to buy 12 screenplay books to do it, you know? And this is where I get like, and this is where I think people I always have people at Body Storytelling who come up to me afterwards, be like, oh, I'd love to do what you do, but I can't.
I'm not as good as you.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, cool, fine, thank you for the compliment, but also like, I don't think that's true. Like, I have no doubt that you can tell a good story, right? Like, and maybe it's just getting to the chops, or maybe just getting the confidence to have somebody like, you know, listen to you and give you some notes. Yeah. But everybody can do it. And that's what I think is really beautiful about storytelling events in general. It's like, this is not a new art form, folks. No. Like, human beings have been doing this for millennia. Yeah. We've got it in us. So it's just finding the confidence to do it is the most important part. And yeah, if you know all the pieces and you can analyze it and draw it on a fucking blackboard, great. But that's not a prerequisite for being able to be a good performer or storyteller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had somebody who told for me a few years ago, and there's a queer man, and like, oh my God, coaching was just that whole process where you're like, what was their name? What did they look like? I mean, there's starting there, and then there's just like, okay, we're going to kind of try and create a story arc out of this, because I know in your head there's an arc, but out here there's not an arc. So let's build it. And it's, you know, it was exhausting. It was a great story, but it was exhausting. That person pitched me a story last month, And, as we'd gone through it, I would say, okay, that's called that. This, what you're doing here, it's even if it's not the name, this, ideally you want to make it look like this. You want to, you know how like, this is so evil. You know how you go to the moth? And you fucking, everybody goes in and they go, oh, and I'm going to tell the story about how I climbed Kilimanjaro. And I climbed it, and I climbed it, and I climbed it, and I got to the top, and I got to the pinnacle. And then I had to come down. And I'm just sitting in the audience going, does everybody in the world like to climb mountains but me? Why are there always stories about mountains here? Mm-hmm. My theory is, this is a bullshit theory. My theory is that we think in story arc, which looks like climbing a mountain.
Right.
It really does. There's the and then flat, and then there's just like, oh my God. Okay, so how are you feeling? I was scared. Oh, okay, scared. That feels like movement up the arc. When they showed up, were they good? Were you afraid? Oh, what if they looked like my ex-boyfriend? I hate my ex-boyfriend. Okay, now I know what we're afraid of.
Yeah.
I'm afraid too, because you're making me care. We're moving up the mountain, that fucking mountain. Please don't tell me a story about Everest, unless you fucked on top of Everest.
I mean, I would like to, but I'd like to take a helicopter there to do it. Would not want to do the climbing part of the climbing of Mount Everest.
Me neither. Yeah. I was like, I'm a fat girl. Is it just me? I don't want to climb a mountain.
I'm not a fat girl, and I also do not want to climb a mountain.
You're athletic.
We're good.
It makes me feel better. You're athletic, and you don't want to do it either.
Nope. Sir, do not. So, I mean, in terms of, like, there are a lot of stories in Body that aren't about just wall-to-wall banging, right? There are, because you say like stories have to be about sex, kink, or gender, right?
Yeah, and body size fits in. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting.
I think it's often relevant to the story, like gender dysmorphia. I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a pass in there.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think people don't really talk about it. And I mean, there's a lot of finger pointing which says, yeah, I'm fine the way I am. There's a lot of finger pointing.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of, I want to tell you about my experience. So I'm test driving it now.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you came just wanting to hear the gangbang story, there's 5 stories. It'll be in there. I have to say that after almost 12 years of doing this, I'm not a one-dimensional person.
Sure.
I'm curious about things other than your gangbang.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm just kind of like, I need to expand this a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to give the audience what they're expecting. But at the same time, I was doing a show for a while called Bonafide, which was no holds barred true stories. Because it's very restrictive to only be talking about sex when it comes to stories. It's a special kind of hard work. I don't know. I can't talk about the stuff in the room. I've never talked about it. I can't say pussy. There's a lot of extra work in there. And I was just like, okay, I have been doing this for a long time, and I love storytelling first and foremost. So let's play with that. But when it came to Body, I was just like, we need to make it a little bit more about other things while staying on topic.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who works very high up in the Moth was like, well, that's easy. Drugs. It's Body. Yeah. So things you don't talk about. Sex and drugs. Yeah, I have feelings about that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say we're not. If I feel like it's important to the story. If you tell me all the crazy shit you did and you're like, oh, I went out to a bar and you tell me a crazy story. I'm like, can I ask a question? Were you drunk? And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, were you on drugs? I was on so many drugs. So the audience is going to be confused at this point because you kind of left that out. It feels crucial to the story, so let's put it in.
Yeah, it's a detail. Yeah.
Sometimes body image fits in there.
Sure. Yeah, so, I mean, it makes sense that you kind of explore different aspects of what... I mean, again, sex is not some isolated incident. And this is, again, kind of talking about what we talked about at the very beginning of, like, sex is important. And the details of the sex are important, but also the way you feel about your body or your gender identity or your, desires. All of those things are also important. Yeah. And so sex is not an isolated incident that you can either subtract or add to a story just based on whether it feels good. Like, it's relevant, and so is how you identify in all these other ways.
That just made me think when you said that about like sex is, regardless of how you feel about it, that's when people start using those shorthand words where they say, the person walked in, how'd they look? They were hot. Okay.
What's
like,
hot
and then
mean to you?
how was the sex? It was amazing.
What's that mean?
I know you think you're telling me something, but you have not told me anything.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And again, like when the experience of surprise, like my favorite story to tell has been like me falling in love with my partner Reed, because that story involves us having non-hetero sex, even though we are a cis woman and a cis man. And that was really important for me as somebody who had, like, my story. It was like I was a lesbian, and then I fell in love with this cis guy, and it was very confusing. And I was worried that it meant, like, now my life is just going to be heterosexual sex, missionary style, vanilla, but banging for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And the first couple times we had sex was actually like all these other things that I didn't think cis men were capable, or cis hetero men were capable of, And all of a sudden we had this whole menu of things to choose from, and that was the best part. And again, like if I just said, oh, and then I fell in love with this cis guy and we had great sex, and then now I'm in love with him, it's like, that would have been, you would have missed the essence of not only the story, but my identity and our relationship. Like the sex defines so much about our relationship. And if I didn't say pegging and sex, like foursomes and, drag and all these other things, it would have been pointless.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know me any better than you did, when I started the story.
And you know how when I said that person goes, what did the person look like? He was hot.
Yeah.
You know what? You taught me that when you told me that story for the first time. You taught me the word cheese dick. I'm like, what's a cheese dick? This guy walks up, he looks like a total cheese dick. I'm like, I don't know what a cheese dick is.
But you feel like, just understanding the word, right? It's evocative as a term, yeah.
Yeah, it was like early douchebag.
Yeah. Well, cheese dick's different from douchebag.
Define cheese dick.
Yeah, so cheese dick is, it's cheesy. Like, he's a little bit like a little awkward, like, TV game show host. Not douchebag. Douchebag's like awful bro dude who's just going to be like, doesn't believe in feminism,
Cheese dick is game show host?
Yeah, a little cheesy. A little like, what? Really? You? Okay. It's cheesy.
So it's trying to imagine fucking a game show host.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ew, cheese dick.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. But not like a modern
the first time you told me that, though,
an 80s game show host. Like Pat Sajak in, like, the early days of...
Chuck Woolery?
I don't know who that is.
Love Connection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a little bit Love Connection. Yeah. Although, wasn't he kind of creepy?
Cheese dick.
Oh, see, I don't know. I guess... Yeah, I think cheese dick's a little more innocent. It's a little bit less grabby, a little bit more like...
Cheese stick is a little less grabby. Okay, wait. Game show host.
Yeah.
A little less grabby, a little bit more.
Yeah, so, okay, so this is the difference. Not 70s game show host. 80s game show host. 80s game show host is Pat Sajak. Maybe a little Alex Trebek when he's trying to be saucy. But 70s game show host is like grabby, creepy, like sleazy. No, there's no
70s?
Sleazy. Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Yeah, there's no sleazy in cheese stick.
Okay.
There's awkward, there's cheesy, but no sleazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've learned so much today.
That's my definition.
I didn't have a definition of cheese dick because I'd never heard the phrase until you told me, and you were just kind of like, I'm in the middle of the story. Let's just say cheese dick. And I'm like, what's a cheese dick?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, and the moral of the story is love comes in all different forms, and we all should be so lucky as to find it. And say yes to it when it comes into your lap, even if it's shaped like a cheese dick.
You're a cheese dick.
See, there you go, exactly.
There used to be this, this just came to me as you were telling me this. I used to go to, do you remember the party Black Sheets? Do you remember Black Sheets? Black Sheets was this.
That's before my time.
It's, back in the Stone Age. And they used to have sex parties in caves.
I would totally go to a sex party in a cave.
Let's have a caveman sex party.
I love
Please don't grab me. Okay, consent and boundaries. Please don't grab me by the hair and drag me into the cave.
Yeah, no.
No, there used to be this guy who was super awkward. Like, he wasn't grabby. This is what I was picturing while you're telling this. Mm-hmm. So at this party, there's like 3 floors, and the doors would open like at 8 o'clock, and everybody's lined up with their little gear bag, which probably said LA Gear on the side of it. And inside they have all their sex toys and their rope and their floggers and their little picnic blanket that they lay out. This is my area. I will be fucking people in this area. Don't step on the picnic blanket. You know, that kind of thing. And so I would go into the party, and it's 8 o'clock. You check your clothes or you walk around and whatever, and you're just wandering around. And this guy, 3 floors, run into him constantly on all the floors. No game whatsoever. He would be naked. And his calling card was he had crafted a special cock ring, which it was like it would wrap around his dick, and then it would go over his taint, and then it would go between his ass cheeks, and there was like a little loop. So this loop on the front for the dick, loop on the back and the crack of the ass, and it would just go, he'd go, whoop, whoop. It's on my dick. It's off my dick. It's on my dick. It's off my dick. And he would just go, people would go, I think it was like a colored metal or something like that. I kind of picture like a peacock blue kind of metal. And you just go, huh. And he'd go, this is my cock ring. I invented this. Would you like to see it? Whoop, 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 whoop. That was his calling card. It got him laid constantly.
Really?
Yeah. People go, I am a geek. Did you make that with your hands?
Yeah.
We should have sex and see if it works.
Sure,
you know, those people.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the machine geeks are I think people have a lack of understanding of how well machine geeks can get laid at orgies.
How do you define machine geeks?
Well, people who like make their own gear, people who like do their own welding or do their own like e-stim stuff, like the engineers, like people, because engineers can sometimes be like on the spectrum a little bit, have a hard time with like the social environments of orgies. But if you make cool shit and you find people who are into cool shit, I think uber geeks who might have some social anxiety but make cool things, they get hella laid at orgies.
I like that you call it machine geeks. I call that prop guys.
Well, prop guys can be guys who just buy a bunch of stuff too.
Yeah, they buy violet wands.
Yeah.
That's the beginner. That's like the my violet wand by Fisher Price. I'm gonna get laid.
Yeah, and then the machine geeks are the guys who make their own attachments to the violet wand,
right?
Specifically for that one chick who asked for a thing. Or person. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So he's got this thing, whoop, 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 and he's doing it. And he's getting laid at every party. I'm going to all the parties. I watch him get laid. But the thing is, at about 10:15, at every party, he will walk up. I'll run into him on a staircase, and he will just stand there naked, just looking at me. He goes, "Hello," and I'm like, "Hello," and he would go, "You know, I just want to tell you I find you very attractive." And I go, "That's nice." And then he'd go, and then I'd walk off. And in my mind, I'm like, I like to gamify sex. And I'm just like, if he ever asked me at 8:15, if he ever said that at 8:15, why am I second on the calling card every fucking party? You always fuck somebody, then you're feeling a little bit like maybe I'm intimidating. Maybe you need to take the edge off. I don't know. But every time, it was like you could tell second part of the evening, he'd make a point of finding me and going, every time, I just want to tell you I find you very attractive. And I'm like, I can't tell him if he asked me at 8:15 because then he'll ask me.
Right.
And that's not a game.
Right.
You know, I'm just like, that's nice.
Yeah.
Never figured it out. Never had sex with him. I don't know how that cock ring works. I just watched it come off. I watched him fuck people with it.
Sir, if you are listening, at 8:15, next sex party, please approach Dixie first. All right. Well, I think we've probably talked so long, so we should probably end it there.
I would like to say that Allison Moon has a Patreon, and you should support this podcast. Where else can you hear these conversations? Well, you can hear them on the Body Storytelling podcast, but that was not a plug for me. That was a plug for Allison.
That was legit a plug for you. Do not deny it. Do not deny it.
But support, there is a lot of work to podcasting. There is so much work, and you're making this for free for people. You're making this because you're giving them exposure to things they don't have in Iowa, in a cornfield where they live. They want to hear these interesting interviews and stories, and they can only get them on the Artgasm podcast.
So that was a cheese dick move. Right there. You figured it out. Well, so, okay, Dixie.
Yeah.
Body Storytelling podcast.
True. It is about to start again. We are starting with season 4. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be 3 or 4 episodes in, maybe.
Nice.
So the podcast has won a bunch of awards from like Best Sex Podcast from Marie Claire and Uprocks and Esquire magazine. That's surprising.
Hot damn.
Who would think they'd like us?
Yeah. Fancy.
Bustle likes us. They say we're a great pervy date.
You are a great pervy date. It's true.
You will get laid.
Yeah.
Podcasts, live storytelling shows, story coaching. I love to work with people to find their stories and to make them feel brave enough to get them out there in the world. What else do I do?
Well, where did the live shows go? You're mostly in San Francisco, but...
San Francisco and Seattle. I'm trying to ramp up for more tours.
Cool.
I'll be back in New York later on this year. I was just in Philadelphia, tried to pull a show together, couldn't find a venue. That's the hardest part. People are like, please come to Ohio. And I'm like, okay, venues never get back to you because they're like, your name's not Elvis. I've never heard of you. Yeah. I'm not going to answer your email. So that's the hard part. If anybody wants to help us with that part, then doing the live show is easy.
Yes, I've told this to people before where just like people will say, like, come to our city. It's like, cool. Like, I would love to, but I need your help. So it's like, if you're one of those people listening to this and be like, I want body storytelling in my hometown, like, just do a little research. What venue do you go to see interesting shows in your town? Like, what kind of situation can you help? Can you even just check in next time you're there, see if the manager's around and ask them? Like, this stuff, it's simple, but it can really help. And it can help get people places. I mean, I often have people wanting me to come teach. And I'm like, yeah, but I can't guarantee, like, I can't fly to, Jacksonville unless you can tell me where I'm going to teach or give me some sort of contacts. So, yeah, if you're listening to this and you want Body App and, like, do a little legwork and reach out to Dixie and say, hey, these are some things I thought about and these are some places you could check out.
I got a really great email from somebody in Florida who went, I love what you do, and I would love to see a live show. And here are all the reasons it would be great in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
And they said, 63% of the population is this. Swinger community gathers at these places. Like, it did all of the, not only do I want it for me, but here's all the other people who would back this up. Sometimes you say, I'd like to do a show in your city, and they go, your show's about sex? We don't do that here.
Yeah.
Atlanta.
Yeah, I've always had a hard time teaching in Atlanta, too. There aren't many venues for sex education.
I'm from Atlanta, motherfuckers. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, and there are cool people in Atlanta.
They are. And there's lots of pervert community in Atlanta. Yeah. But the venues go to church. And the venues are like, we don't have people talking about their sex here in our tavern. And it's like, well, okay. Well,
there we go. So Atlanta, if you're listening, make a hometown girl make good. Get her to your town.
I've always wanted to do a show in Atlanta. Yeah. I've been out here for a long time, and I didn't know pervert community when I lived in Atlanta. Now there's huge. I see people talking about it. I'm like, where was that when I was living there?
It's all that Hollywood influence.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They got big film.
Got a lot of movies there now, which means all the perverts, all the queers, all of them.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Okay. On that note, so where can people find you on the interwebs?
Bodystorytelling.com, which is spelled B-A-W-D-Y, not B-O-D-Y. It's about your body, but that's not how we spell it. We spell it like Mae West, like risque, like off color, like blue. Yeah. Not color blue. Blue. And bodystorytelling.com. On Twitter, we're Body. On Instagram, we're Body Storytelling. We're Body Storytelling all over the place.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Dixie.
Thank you,
Thanks
Allison.
for giving me 2 hours of your vacation.
Jesus Christ, that was a long interview.
You can tell some stories, Al. All right, good job. Perfect. Love it. And that is it for this week's bonus episode of Artgasm Podcast. If you want to see body storytelling in real life, I really recommend it. Check out bodystorytelling.com. She brings it to a lot of different cities. Its home base is San Francisco, but she comes to Seattle. She's been in Los Angeles. She's gone to Chicago. New York is coming up soon. So if you're going to be in New York, check it out there. She's doing a co-production with Kevin Allison of the Risk podcast, which is really just a sight to behold. It's one of my favorite scenes ever. One of my favorite storytelling experiences was actually telling at a combined story, the trigger warning show that we talk about on the podcast. So I definitely recommend it if you're in New York to check that out soon. In the meantime, you can also listen to her podcast. It's called Body Storytelling, and you can find it at all the usual places. And while you're at it, subscribe to Artgasm. We're both on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Store, and of course, Apple Podcasts. And subscribe, share, and help make the world a more artfully sexy and sexily artful place. I will be back with you next week with another wonderful interview with another wonderful sexy time artist, and I hope you'll join me then. Thanks.